right now. I just see your slide making accessible PDFs.
Perfect. Okay. So this morning we are going to look at making accessible PDFs from scanned documents and also talk a little bit about what makes an accessible PDF and some alternatives to converting an old scanned PDF. It's really important to understand, first off, what the difference is between a scanned PDF and an accessible PDF. When you create a PDF by scanning a text on a copier or regular scanner, you're basically making a picture of each page and almost like taking a photo. And if you use your mouse to try to select any of the text within that PDF, it won't be able to. And I have an example. So this document that you see here is just a scanned PDF. I have to have my tool set to select in order to do this test. And you'll see when I select the text, it just highlights the entire screen blue. If this text had been scanned and then had the optical character recognition process completed to identify text, then I can highlight specific words and chunks of text. So that is a cue to me that this text at least has the text identified, which is one step in the accessibility process. Even if you do the OCR aspect, or if you use a scanner that has OCR, there are other elements required to make the PDF truly accessible. Things like having alternative text for images and having some kind of heading structure, especially for a longer text, like a section from a textbook. In order for a PDF to be considered accessible, it needs these elements. So as we've already seen, you need text that can be selected, copied and searched. You have alternative text for any images, and alternative text is just a textual description of a picture that helps someone with low vision or who's using a screen reader to know what is in that picture. If an image is just there for decorative purposes, then you can also mark images as decorative, which means that they're not necessary to have that alternative text. Having tagging for structural elements, so identifying headers and subheaders, giving the text a designated title and identifying what language it is in, making sure it's oriented the correct way for reading and that it doesn't have extraneous marks. And so again, here is an example of a text that is not oriented the correct way for reading. So this text was scanned on a copier with both pages scanned at the same time. And in order to read it, I have to turn my head to the side. This is not a useful text for anyone, whether or not a student has an accommodation. And the black line around the outside is also going to create issues. So we want to try to avoid those things to have an accessible PDF. So that is what an accessible PDF needs. How do we get there with our documents? My biggest recommendation is before you try to fix an old scanned document, think about these steps. So there might be an easier way than retrofitting a scanned PDF, which can be a little time consuming. First of all, you can check to see if the library has an electronic copy of the article or the book chapter that you need, and then link directly to that through our resources. Those documents already have these accessibility pieces built into them and sometimes even have additional accessibility tools students can access, like text-to-speech. If your original document is an Office document, a Google document, a PowerPoint, you can also create an accessible PDF directly from those programs that will be better than a scan. Or if you're posting it on Blackboard, you can post those documents in their native format, and students will be able to read them within the Blackboard environment without having to have a PDF. If you're using a math equation tool, I do recommend checking in with an instructional designer for support, but also Blackboard Ultra now has an equation tool that allows you to copy and paste from LaTeX if that's what you're using and make it accessible. So I'm just sorry for all the bumping in and out of the slides. So here is an example of linking to the library. So this is one of the texts that's used for courses in the Alaska Native Studies classes, the Alaska Native Reader. And if I wanted a student to read this book or access chapters from this book, I could send them to this page. Then they can find the chapter that they need and open that up and read it here in this web environment. This is already accessible. There's also a text-to-speech option, and if I click this button, it will read the text to me. It is kind of a computerized voice, so it's not ideal. There's also an accessibility support button. So those tools that we have through our library databases incorporate accessibility. In the Blackboard environment, I'm going to get out of my PDF here for a moment. So I can create a new content item. I'm just going to say document. And then once I am in here, in order to access the math equation tool, it's under this plus item. So I just say plus math. It does give me a formula toolbar that I can use to create formulas, but I can also copy and paste from LaTeX into this math formula tool and insert it and have that be an accessible form. Just gonna come out of this. All right. So I will also note that there are some issues with scanned PDFs that cannot be fixed. So if your scanned PDF has one of these issues, then you really need to start from scratch, unfortunately, or have an alternative. One of those is if your scanned document is handwritten. I realize this doesn't apply to every class, but certainly some primary source documents in history have handwritten documents. The best way to get around that issue is to just provide a typed transcript in an accessible format so that you have both. This could be helpful for all students as well. We are finding that many incoming students may not have learned cursive and have a hard time reading cursive writing, or especially like cursive writing that might be found in a primary source document. So having that typed transcript is helpful for even students who don't necessarily need a screen reader. Other things that are going to be extremely challenging to fix and will probably be better to just start over. If you have part of an additional page, like a facing page on your scan, as in this example, that's really challenging to deal with. It's better to just go back and rescan and make sure that you don't allow any of that second page to come in there. You want to be careful if you are scanning a book with the pages going into the spine. When the curve of the spine makes it challenging to read words, this makes this document difficult to read for everyone. Again, not just students who need a screen reader, and you will not be able to fix it very easily, if at all. And then finally, if your scan has blurred text, like this example, I could maybe puzzle out most of these words, but it's challenging and it just adds an additional stress on trying to read this document. A screen reader is not going to be able to read this document. And if you tried to OCR this document, you'd have to go back in and do a lot of cleanup to explain what these words are. So starting over is your best option. A couple of additional tips for scanning. It's a good idea to keep a copy of your original document or scan so that you can check your PDF against it, especially if you're using technology to do the text recognition process. It's a lot easier to fix if you have the real thing right there in front of you, the original. Closing the cover on the copier when you're scanning helps to limit that black outline that can appear. OCR often interprets that black outline as an image, using like a second piece of paper to block any additional pages, and using a high quality scanner to start. So in the library, we do have here in Juneau, we have a high quality book scanner that will split apart books into separate pages and can cut out some of the extraneous pieces of information that sometimes come up on a scan, and will also do the OCR process as a part of the scan. Lastly, if you get stuck or something is too difficult or frustrating to fix, please reach out to one of our instructional designers through CALT. They are more than happy to help you. I'm also happy to help. I will occasionally scan book chapters or documents for folks in my liaison areas to help make that process easier for course readings. And as with all accessibility challenges, these things it's easiest to start now and make a commitment to make your documents accessible from here on out, and then go back and fix your old materials, a little at a time, starting with the things that are kind of most egregious. So making sure at a start that you have that OCR on all of your PDFs. You can go back and get help for doing the other pieces and parts later, but at a minimum, if a student can access that PDF with a screen reader, it's going to solve a lot of accommodations challenges. All right. If you have a PDF, an old PDF, excuse me, that you do want to convert to an accessible one, so you can't create a new scan, or the scan you have is really clean, it just needs to have those accessibility pieces. This is what I've found to be the easiest way to convert a prior scanned PDF into an accessible one. So the first is to upload a copy of the document to your Blackboard test course. You can do this in an active live course too, but I found that a lot of times faculty are hesitant to do that because they don't want to mess up things that students are seeing. If you don't have a test course, especially if you're a staff member and maybe not in Blackboard, it is possible for you to have a test course created. I think anybody in the UAS system. So again, contact Ramona or one of our instructional designers and they can help you get a test course set up. Or for our regular faculty, if you don't know how to set up a test course, it's kind of a nice sandbox to play around with these tools and test things out before putting them live in your class. Once you have uploaded your document to your test course, you're going to give it a little bit of time for the Blackboard Ally tool to recognize your document and indicate what the problems are. And then you can use our alternative formats menu to download that scanned PDF as an OCR'd PDF. Once you have that OCR'd copy, then you can open it in Foxit, which is our PDF editor, and run the accessibility checker. Foxit will also guide you through fixing the accessibility issues. Again, if there's an issue that you aren't sure how to fix, contact an instructional designer. Some things don't really need to be fixed or are okay leaving as is, and some are more essential. Foxit also has a spell checker that allows you to double check for inaccuracies in that text recognition process. So I'm going to now go through these steps so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so go back into my test course. So this is my test course, and I have some PDFs in here. So the Ally tool in Blackboard is an accessibility checker, and when you upload documents to Blackboard, it will give you a score. So this one is red is telling me that this is low, orange means that it's part of the way there, and green means that it's good. And if I click on that dial, I will get more information about what's wrong. So this is saying this PDF is scanned. So this doesn't even have the text recognition piece. So next to this little dial, you see here's that download alternative formats. If I click on this button and it's a scanned PDF, one of the options that you'll have is to download it as an OCR PDF. So this will do that text recognition. It also does some cleanup of the text. So sometimes it will get rid of black lines around the edge, or if the text is a little blurry in your scan, it will clean that up. And then I just select download. Sometimes this process takes a little while. So I'm actually going to cancel it because I have a copy already in here. So going back to these textbook slides from the beginning of the presentation. So here's my just scanned PDF. This one is after I have downloaded it using that OCR process through Blackboard Ally. So again, I can tell that it's been OCR'd because I can highlight the text, individual words. If you do not have Foxit on your computer, Foxit is the approved university PDF editing tool that's available, and you can download this program. The first time you use it, you have to authenticate with your UA username and password, but it has a lot of flexibility for editing PDFs beyond accessibility. So I would definitely recommend, if you don't have it, that it's a good program to have. And if you look across the top in my menus, there is a menu called accessibility. And when you go to that menu, one of the options is to check your document. So I'm going to go ahead and do the full check. So Foxit is now showing me over on the left-hand side, these are the areas of my document that have issues. Anything that's bold is an area with an issue that needs to be addressed. I can use the little plus tool to open this up. So I see under document, it says 4 issues. 2 of these are manual check, so logical reading order. So you could just use the screen reader within Foxit to see if it's reading things in the correct order. This is really more of an issue for slides than it is for a straight text like this one. And then color contrast. So this is just a black and white document. Contrast is fine, so I'm not going to worry about that one. But you can see here that the document has failed in primary language and title. So these are 2 things that need to be identified. These are very easy to fix. I just right-click on the item, like primary language, and choose fix. A window pops open. I can pick my language. So if this were in Spanish, for example, I could choose Spanish or one of many other languages that are in the drop-down. In this case, it's English, so I'm going to say okay. And then title, same thing. I just right-click, say fix, and then I put in the title. So this is chapter 17 from a biology textbook. You could also put in an author if you want to, you don't have to. So now that one is passed. If we go down to the next item, page content, so I'm going to minimize that. Okay, I have tab order failed. Again, I can right click and fix. And I'm just going to say, okay, that's fixed. We'll close that little box. And then the alternative text. So if I look at my document, there are 3 images here. There's this red maple flower, and another flower with a bee, and down at the bottom is another flower. But you'll also notice that in this example, each of these images has a very complete text caption that gives enough information that I don't actually need to have additional alternative text for the picture, because I would just say what it says here, flowers of a red maple. Um, so I could mark these pictures as decorative if I wanted to. If there weren't that complete text caption, then I would definitely want to add the alternative text. So again, I right-clicked and picked Fix. You can see on the document, it's highlighted in this kind of blue-gray, so that I know that this is the image that that I'm providing the alternative text for. I'm going to give this one alternative text so that you can see what that looks like. And then I use the arrow to navigate to the next one. And then to the next one. So this one I'm just going to mark as decorative. So that means that a screen reader will skip over the picture. It will still read the text caption, so students will get that information of what was in that figure. And then save and close. And so now that has also passed. So my document is now all set. I could post it back to my Blackboard site after I save it, of course, and then post it to my live site, and it should be good to go. There are other options up here in the editor. If you have a document that hasn't been tagged, you can use the auto tagging and it will label things for you, headings and such. It's not always super accurate. If you want to see the reading order, so how it has the headings and things identified, if I click on that reading order, oops, sorry, it opened the menu on my other screen. I'll pull it over here so you can see it. And so it has labeled these things for me. If I wanted to go in, let's say I want to go in and I want to change this pollination by animals, that's really the heading for this page. So I can change that to a heading 1. But the rest of this is just pretty much plain text, and so it should be fine. But there are those options to just go in and highlight. This is also really good for getting rid of stray marks. So again, this one doesn't really have any, but if you had like a stray black mark, I could just use my cursor, draw a box around it, and then pick this background artifact, and it will just ignore that item. So that does sometimes happen with your with screen when you do the scanning and OCR process. In the edit menu, there is also a spell check. So I can run this to check the spelling, and it will identify in the item here, in the scan, the word, and then it's giving me a suggestion. I am not sure if that is correct or not. So this is where having the text is really important. So I can ignore this, it'll move on to the next thing. So it's just not identifying that that's like a, like flowers is going across the thing. So the spell check, it's not like perfect when you have a document like this. I can go in and edit other places. So for example, this word here looks like it should actually be A-R-E. So I can choose to edit the text and click in here and just fix that. Oops, not to a 3. So this allows me to just click in the document and then make little text corrections if there are obvious misspellings. I am going to pause there to see if folks have questions about Foxit. Right, I am not seeing any. So in the slides, there are also some screenshots of these things just as a good like reminder to go back if you need to see where to find those tools. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. So I just say again, the main things are like accessible PDFs are really important. We have a lot of students who have text-to-speech or screen reader capability as accommodations. It's not just for students who are blind or have low vision. Having that read aloud component is often really helpful for students with other kinds of disabilities. And so we're seeing it more and more coming through the Disability Services Office when students can't access readable PDFs. So having readable PDFs is important. If it's too complicated and you want help with it, we have a great instructional design team who can help. And like starting from where you are now and making things accessible from here on out, and then fixing your other content as needed is a good way to approach it so that it's not too overwhelming. And then I just wanted to show one last thing actually, which go back to my, so if you're not sure in your course where those inaccessible PDFs might be, the Blackboard Ally tool also has a course accessibility overview under this course and institution tools. So it's one of the first ones, accessibility report. It will flag content with easiest issues to fix. And actually for certain kinds of issues, you can just fix them right from in here, but it will identify that low scoring content. And those just scanned PDFs with no text recognition are always going to show up as red. So I can click start and then it's going to tell me what are those items that are scanned PDFs that are 0% accessible, so that I can work on finding those and replacing them. And that is all I have. Oh.
So thank you, Kaya. This was so helpful and really interesting. I know if I'm scanning something for a faculty member, I often scan one page at a time and make a copy so I could have the copy and be sure it's clear, and then I'll scan that. But I would love for you to do this for our faculty when we have enhancing instruction at some point, but we'll talk later about that.
Yep,
But
I'd be happy
thank
to.
you. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for this. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
And sorry I was late. I'll watch the slides to catch up. You mentioned that several students have issues that maybe we might not be aware of. Are those students who are not necessarily getting letters of disability? So in other words, would I not know about that because I wouldn't be receiving a letter of disability from DSS at the beginning of the semester unless they personally disclose?
So often what happens is that you are getting a letter from Disability Services, and then when the student goes into your class and can't screen read the PDF, they contact the Disability Services Office, and who then says, hey, you have this issue, can you please fix it? I'm pretty sure that that's the case, and a lot of when CALT is notified about it, in the past, Disability Services has often like looped in CALT when they contact the faculty member to say, like, here are some things that need to be fixed. CALT is here to support you. Ramona, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, I think that's right. I think sometimes yes, so sometimes you'll get a notification that someone has a documented disability. You may not know what it is, so you might not know like which things they need. We are responsible for making everything accessible, which is a really it's a difficult task, right? We have a lot of things that are not accessible and would are technically supposed to be accessible by January 2026. But yes, in reality, a lot of times the way that happens is you don't know your PDF is not accessible, and then you find out why, but you don't really know who it is, or maybe you do. I think I had another point there, but definitely just reach out. I mean, if you know what you're using next semester, it's a great, you can always, if you're not really sure how to check, there are tools for you to use to check. But if you're not really sure or you're frustrated, reach out to me or anybody, any of the other instructional designers. I will really emphasize, so today Kaya mostly talked about scanned PDFs. A lot of the tools that she talked about, if you're working in Microsoft Word or Google Docs and then you save something as a PDF, a lot of the issues that she's talking about won't be present. So things like artifacts from the scan, like black marks, or images not showing up, like text showing up as just to a computer, just looking like an image and not being readable. But some things that she talked about you will see. So for example, the language and the title are two things a lot that are really easy to fix after you save as a PDF, but aren't always, like, if you haven't specifically gone into Word and entered that, then you might see that. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you have a scanned PDF, I really emphasize maybe trying to find a different solution. I am very happy to help you try to get that scan accessible, but those are definitely the most difficult ones. So if there's something that's already digital in the library or something like that, it's a great time to start working on your materials so that you're not hearing about it at the last minute in a following semester. Some of the things too, sorry to just babble on and on. I just had so many thoughts while Kaya was talking. Some of the things that Kaya mentioned, I don't think you were here yet, Erica, but things like the page being sideways, they can seem like to us something that the student could fix, right? Like, oh, well, the student can rotate the page, but a lot of times someone with a disability, even, or someone with that, not someone with a documented disability, but maybe just some of our students who are not as tech savvy, they might not know how to do that. So if we just do it for them, then it makes it so that they can focus on the class content rather than trying to get the document to work. So I guess my overall point is, if you're not sure or you're nervous about something, send me an email and we can check it out and see if there's anything that we can do. A lot of times it's really easy, and then sometimes it's not so easy, and it's good to get some help so you're not sitting there frustrated with something.
Yeah, I was just trying to sort of gauge how many students might be out there having these challenges who don't have a documented disability, right? Because
I think it's a lot,
I'm
honestly.
trying to prioritize what I do, what I work on, right? And how much, right? Because I have some larger, 101 classes where I get, 5 or 6 or 10 disability letters. And that obviously those are priorities. But I'm wondering if you just have any sense of how many students are out there that may not have a documented disability, but still would be highly benefited by making some of these modifications.
I mean, I will add that like making your materials accessible in this way, especially for text to speech, helps so many students. We have students who just want to be able to like listen to the text while they're doing other things because they're employed full time, they are taking care of kids, they are riding the bus and are listening to their readings. They are not as fluent in English, and so it helps them to hear it and see it at the same time. And those kinds of issues aren't going to come up as documented disabilities, but it is a huge support for those students. And I think also just, again, like starting from where you are now and really trying to make things as accessible as possible. Then you have less to do if you get those accommodations letters and you know that you're supporting a greater number of students. So it's like it's already built in. You don't have to think about it as much. Generally, in the disability services letters, they will tell you specific accommodations, like more time on tests, or so if you see a student has like a screen reader accommodation or a text to speech, that's where the scanned PDF problem will come into play.
Yeah, I want to say thank you for asking that question because I feel like I just planted you in the audience to ask that, Erica. Um, but yeah, I do think it's a lot. I don't know for PDFs, I don't have like a statistic that I can remember. I can say for captions, over 75% of students use captions, whether they have a documented disability or not, right? So they might be sitting in a apartment with a bunch of roommates and they can't really hear the video, and so they're using the captions. So it's definitely people who make use of these things. And like I was saying, a lot of people will use the text to speech feature with or without, right? So it helps a lot of people access that. I'm not sure on text to speech. I don't have a nice statistic from a survey that I can remember right now, but I feel pretty confident it's a really good number, maybe over half. But yeah, I think a lot of people use those two things. So just having that available to them, which means basically making a computer able to read your PDF so that all those tools will work.
Hi there, I've
Go
got
ahead.
a question. So the things I tend to post to Blackboard are like not scanned. They're PDFs I make from Word or from LaTeX typesetting programs. And when I upload those, they always give me a low score on accessibility. And I just like went to my course and I clicked one of them and, what's the reason? And they said that they need tags. They're not tagged, and that's the main thing. And then I just noticed, this hasn't happened before, but when I click the PDF, actually it comes up completely black. And if I like highlight, the text appears. So it's like black on black when I click it in Blackboard. If I download it, it's like white on black and I can see the text. So I don't know what's going on there, but now none of my stuff is accessible to anyone, I don't think, because you can't see it at all. Actually, maybe the screen reader would be able to see it. So I guess, yeah, what do we do to fix those tags? And have you seen this before where the PDFs just don't really appear the right way?
So I would say like with the tags, if you open up the PDF and Foxit, so definitely like making it accessible as much as you can in Word or the program that you're using. And then when you're using Word, also using the built-in headings in Word, because that's a lot of the tagging is that heading structure. And I can show you an example if you want. I also am conscious that we're like 10 minutes over time, so I can stay and show people, but okay. So it's going to take me just a second here. I will open up. I'll
Well,
also, oh yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, Kaya, just so that when I